Good evening to everyone and new friends, and I know everyone else here, but I just recently found out I was going to do this, and then I saw Tom's description of this on Friday, and I'm like, oh, that's what I'm talking about. And so, although I think he was fairly accurate with it, but since it's the way forward and it's kind of an open, safe environment for us to talk about faith, what we've experienced, maybe how we're processing theology and the change in how we view theology. Maybe I'm using the word theology, maybe it's not your word, but in that spirit, while I'm speaking about my story, I think it would be appropriate and great if we would ask questions, if we would talk, if we would have discussion. There are some parts of it where I might just say, this is my story and here was what was going on, but ask me a question, break in, or I know some of you are just dying to give me a hard time. I think Dawn said she was going to harass me this evening, so let it fly, Dawn. Anyhow, this is a bit of my story, and I want to say that it's mine and may not be yours, and I'm not trying to I'm really not. There are parts of it that might sound a little like sermony or whatever, but that's not what I'm doing. It's just kind of how I processed my journey. Africa had something to do with that. It isn't the total of where I've been and where I've gone and what I've sort of been processing, but it played a big part of it. And so I'll get to that, but I wanted to let you know a little bit about my background. My parents raised us in a Assemblies of God church, which is Pentecostal. That's, I guess, how they would describe that denomination. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a minister in the Assemblies of God. And of course, when we were children, we just thought, hey, that's grandpa. But we did get a sense of, kind of his devotion. I would say he was pretty devout. We would be at the gas station with him. We'd like to go four-wheeling with him. He built this four-wheel drive Jeep out of a 56 Army's Willys, and he dropped this diesel motor into it. We thought he was, hung the moon, and that he was our grandpa. But we would be at a gas station, and he's filling up with diesel, and he'd pull out his Bible and walk over to his neighbor filling up over there, and do a little bit of witnessing. But he was very authentic about it, and I remember him. I remember a sense of him just being sincere and graceful about it. And I think I took something positive from that, when I started thinking about my own faith. But our church was, now we would say they were on a spectrum. They were probably more right. They were more evangelical, although Assemblies of God isn't always that way. But my upbringing and my theology, I guess, was formed in part by that church and that denomination. But also, and maybe even more importantly, and more of an effect on me and my journey was growing up in this country. I grew up in Colorado, and I'm in the United States of America, an American citizen, and I think that informed a lot of my journey when I was young and a young adult, and even into my 30s. And so I wanted to ask you guys, and I'm going to throw something out here about how my construct of theology. And when I say theology, you guys all know what I'm talking about, of course. I mean, everybody does theology. Everybody wonders what God is like. Even atheists have theology. They process this, and then they come to a place where, like, well, I did theology, and I decided that God doesn't exist. But, being raised in the church and being taught by my parents, and, growing up in Sunday school, and then, as a young adult and all this, I even went to a couple years at a Christian college. You start to build a theological construct. And I like the metaphor of a house. You have a theological house. And some people's house, maybe it's small, maybe it's a cabin, like, when you're young and you first meet Jesus, Jesus as in a certain way. Karen and I, my wife, were talking about this last night. What was your experience as an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old, and you have this experience and you start to wonder or decide or imagine what Jesus is like. Maybe you go to a Christian school and now your theological house looks more like it has a couple of wings on it. It's dispensationalism, eschatology. You have some, what do you think about the incarnation and prophecy and blah, blah, blah. Mine wasn't all that complex, but it was there, and it was informed also by this country we live in. So I wrote down just one sentence that I picked from my upbringing, and I'm not saying comment on it, but maybe you want to add this. In fact, I'll throw a couple things out, but this sentence was something you would hear at the church I grew up in. The Bible is the inerrant, infallible, inspired, and literal Word of God. The Bible is inerrant, infallible, inspired, and literal Word of God. Maybe you heard this, maybe you believe it, which is fine. But that's something that kind of soaks into you when you're a young person, And then when you start to read the Bible, you think, well, what about, slavery? What about, I can't eat shellfish? Or what about, all these things? You can, if someone gets raped, then maybe you pay money to that person, and then it's okay. And you read all these things from the Old Testament. Old Testament's easy to pick on, obviously, although it's beautiful. But sometimes you come up against these dead ends, and I think for me, there were dead ends. There were questions even early on, once I started digging into it a little bit. I don't know, if you guys have any like that, throw them out, because, I'm kind of trying to make a point here. Then you weave in culture. You weave in what it means to be a success, American individualism, capitalism. Not that it's, the worst system in the world, but, sometimes it gets a little messy, right? Militarism, consumerism, all the good isms I'm naming here. And somehow those get mixed in with your theology too, And we were here talking about questions and deconstruction. And so, even early on, I think I had some questions about that. And especially after going to, I spent a year at Evangel College. It's an evangelical college in Missouri. I was just a kid. I didn't know what I was doing, and I wasn't that enamored with the whole process there anyway. But I left, and then I went to Oral Roberts University for a couple of years. That was a lot of fun. It was fun, but I wasn't paying attention to their theology. I was just, Anyway, I would have been the kind of guy at like 18 or 19 or something that would have like a, maybe a Jesus fish on my car or something, and was like, "Are you a Christian? Yeah. Did you see my car? Did you see my bumper sticker?" You know, real meaningful, real deep. But so my theological house was, I mean, honestly, it really, it honestly wasn't worthy of Jesus. It wasn't. And maybe that's not so unusual. I mean, sometimes we build this construct in our mind in this house that is not worthy of the king. Sometimes it can cause harm. It can cause injury to us, And once in a while, maybe it is worthy. I don't know, but mine was probably not. I was probably more of interested in my own life, more interested in, building a career, becoming successful. All I wanted to do was be an airline pilot, and all I wanted to do was fly airplanes. And that's the only thing I thought about when I was, in my late teens, in my 20s. I'm not going to dig into all this, but I got married. Half the time I wasn't at home. I was out flying airplanes. I was chasing jobs. I lived in different parts of the country than my wife lived in, blah, blah, blah. That didn't work out. I was building a construct to me. I mean, I'm not an evil person. I was just doing what I thought I was supposed to do, right? And I was passionate about something. And it kind of worked out. I mean, I've been doing that job for 30 some years, so it sort of worked out. But I did come to a place where I was like, there is a Jesus that I think I know, and the Christianity I know is, Jesus deserves a better form of the Christianity that I know. That's how I'll put that. And so that's kind of a backdrop for me. And that's really a very shallow peek at where I was. So I made it into the airlines. Things were working out okay, I guess. My father was he was building homes. He had a successful, building business contractor down in Colorado Springs. And I started to do that with him. Karen and I had just gotten married, and I had all these visions of, developing and building, and I wanted to be a Ken Colvin. I basically is what I'm saying. No, Ken is 10 times the man I was when I was that age. But it felt kind of shallow. It didn't feel like me, like trying to figure out how to stack up the money and be a success. And my wife, Karen, and we were just married. We hadn't been married that long. And Karen came from I don't know, Karen could tell her story, but there was I think there was some push from Karen about, especially when we were going to have kids, about, what do you believe? What are you going to teach our kids about hell? And, and to fill in the blank, and I'm over there, just going, well, I'm not really sure I know, which wasn't the right answer at the time, But that went on for a while, and I got to this point where, and I remember this really distinctly because I was downstairs and I was running on our treadmill, and I was praying, and I was praying something like, God, my wife wants to change me, but I want you to change me. And it was a sincere prayer. And I prayed this, you know, be careful, by the way, if you do pray this. And I was saying, you know, God, you know, I'm ready, you know, change me. If I need to be changed, change me, you know. And it seems like it wasn't, you know, now that I think back on it, it wasn't that long after that, the beginnings of this Africa process started. I wrote down here, I was too embarrassed by my theological house to invite friends over. Which isn't completely true, but my friend, who was a good friend at the time and still is, his name is Rick. He was the assistant, was he the business pastor, the assistant pastor? I don't know. We were going to church, he was a pastor there. And we kind of hit it off. We met and we were hanging out. Well, he was at a 4th of July parade with us in the little town where we live in down there, Monument. And a guy that I kind of sort of knew, barely knew, his name's Tom Davis. He was the president of Children's Hope Chest, which is a nonprofit. They do work around the world with like orphanages, and it's kind of the kid sponsorship model. I saw Tom there. I introduced Rick to Tom, and they talked, and Tom said, hey, we're going on a trip to Africa, and he was trying to invite sort of fake leaders from the community and everything. Didn't invite me, invited Rick. And Rick went, and they went to South Africa, and they went to Swaziland. Swaziland is a small country, really small. It's in the northeast part of South Africa. It's bordered on 3 sides by South Africa, and a little bit of it is the border of Mozambique. Mozambique is like there and to the north on the ocean. He went there, and he came back, and he was moved by it, and he and his wife decided they wanted to adopt kids from there. So in the process of this adoption process, he had gone back, and while he was there, he was on a safari. Did you guys say you were just on a safari? Yeah. So yeah, a photo safari. Did you guys go to Kruger?
No.
You didn't go to Kruger? Kruger's the gigantic, famous park there in South Africa. He went on one that, and I've been on this one numerous times in Swaziland. By the way, in 2018, the king of Swaziland renamed Swaziland to Eswatini. I always call it Swazi because everyone just like Swazi. Now it's called Eswatini, but I'll get to that in a minute. So if you look it up on a map, that's my point, it's going to say Eswatini. So Rick goes to Eswatini, Swaziland, to adopt these kids, and he's on a photo safari, and he's sitting on a Jeep next to a guy whose name is Martin Schafstall. Marty Schafstall sold his IT company to Cisco back in '93 or something for, like $300 million. And he and Marty hit it off over the subject of old cars. Like, I think Marty has, well, I know he has because I've been out there. He has a collection of like muscle cars, and Rick loves muscle cars. But Marty had been doing a lot of philanthropic work in Africa, around Africa. He has a compound ranch, whatever. He has land out by Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and he's got a winery, and he does solar projects and water projects. He does a lot of beta testing of stuff, wells, wind, solar, blah, blah, blah out there. And then he hits on stuff, and he takes it to Africa and implements it out there. So Rick and Marty are talking about cars, and Marty says, well, why don't you come out and see what I got going out here? There's a car show the next month or whatever, and you can come out and drive my cars, hang out, see what I'm doing. So Rick comes back from this, and he says to me, do you want to go out here? And I'm like, go where? Go out to Harrisburg. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm always down for an adventure. And so long story short, we went out there. Actually, Marty didn't for some reason didn't know we were coming. We get off the airplane, it's 10 o'clock at night in Harrisburg, and I'm like, is he picking us up? And he's like, well, I'm not sure he knows we're coming this weekend. I'm like, that, immediately I was like, this is going to be a disaster, But, so we got a cab, we went out there. It's a gated thing. By now it's like 11 o'clock at night. We're pressing the button, like, or what are we doing here? I'm like, this is nuts. And, but, he eventually he let us in, and he was nice. We spent the weekend there, and talked a lot with him. He's kind of a quirky, kind of a, very wealthy guy who, kind of hides out on his compound, really kind of a quirky guy, but nice. So we had a good weekend. He showed us around. He showed us what he was doing. But in the process, he started talking about Swaziland. And Rick is kind of he likes to evaluate people, and he calls it debriefing. He always wants to debrief something. So, we're having dinner with Marty, and then later in the evening, he's like, let's sit in my room and try and, pick this guy's personality apart and figure what drives him and what, kind of odd, but, Marty was that odd, but Rick said maybe, Marty talked about what he's doing in Africa, and Rick said, maybe, we can get some ideas from Marty, and we can get, actually what he said was, I would love it if my kids could grow up and have a connection to where they're from. And also if they could have some kind of positive impact on this country. Because Swaziland is, it's very poor. The rate of AIDS is very, very high. It's, it's probably vying, I keep hearing it's the number one, it's the country in Africa with the number one rate of AIDS, highest rate of AIDS. Today, they say over 28% of people in that country have AIDS. When we started going, we were told the average lifespan for a man is 27 and a half years. For a woman, it's 32 years. Now, I don't know how they know and how true that is, but I've seen or read that Swazi is I think they're number 11. I'm the 11th lowest for lifespan of any country in the world. There's not a lot of infrastructure there. There's mass poverty. It's an absolute monarchy. It's one of only 2 left in the world. It has a king, King Mswati. He's been the king since 1986, I think. And his kingship is through lineage. So his father was the king, the country is pretty stable. I mean, it's one language, basically. I mean, it's close to other countries, so there's some bleed. The Afrikaans, of course, is spoken there, but their tribal language, everybody speaks that, Siswati. So there's not a lot of, it's mostly one tribe too. So, there's not unrest there, but it's not a pleasant place. The king has ministers, he'll appoint somebody, you're the minister of, agriculture or whatever. Oh, thank you, King. Well, hey, you are my brother, right? That's how that works. You're the minister of roads. I mean, you're my cousin, so, Rick kind of knew, like, this country is a mess and it needs something, and maybe my kids can have that connection and maybe be a positive influence. I think that was just his initial thought. And so Martin pitches this idea to us, kind of, we ask him, like, what can we do? And he kind of pitches this idea to us. And the idea is that we raise some money and we start a farm in the northern part of Swaziland. There are two cities in Swazi. They're not cities, they're towns. They're not big, and there's not a lot of infrastructure there. The capital is called Baban. That's where the king lives. It's right across the border. And it's in the kind of more mountainous, hilly part of Swazi. Swazi's it's not very wide, it's more long, and the northern part is hilly and wet, and the southern part is very dry and arid. He lives up north with his mother in a palace. He has 14 wives who live in other palaces. I'm going to try not to get too off track here, and I could talk for hours about Africa. So I got my clock though. So we're thinking about this farm idea, and Marty helps us get this thing set up because he has leased land from a person there, lots of acreage. So he kind of knows the system. He says, I know a guy, he has a lot of land there. I can talk to him. He can lease you guys some land. He grows geraniums. And these flowering plants, well, they're geranium in the geranium family, but not like we see here. Our geraniums kind of have bigger leaves and bigger flowers. These have little tiny white flowers and smaller leaves. And they use like the top half of the plant, they cut it out, or they distill the oil out of it, and geranium oil is used for fragrances and colognes. It's on almost all colognes. I mean, after I started doing this, I started looking at colognes and stuff. We even produced our own colognes for a while, which were awful, by the way, like really bad. And anyway, so we put some money together, we leased some land, and we started this project. Not knowing anything, not knowing the first thing about Africa, Swaziland, culture, language, you name it. It was a disaster in the making, but it was an adventure. So again, I'm always down for an adventure. So we did this, we started this. We didn't really start it per se. I mean, we weren't on the ground. We had a connection point there, a guy who ended up becoming our farm manager, and he had run some other businesses there for Marty. His name is Jumbo. Not his real name, he's Jumbo. A big white South African guy, but passionate about his vision for people and helping, and so Jumbo was kind of one of our point guys on the ground. So we start going over there, and now again, this is my story. So the white American guy who knows all about success and achievement and thinks he has a theological house that is deserving, or maybe I've figured some stuff out, right? I plopped down here in Africa, and that's when all the fun began, right? The fun. I've been there many times, but some of my first experiences were probably the most jarring to me. I think the first time I was there, we went up, so one of now my great friends now, his name is Mkolisi. He is, at the time I didn't know it, but he's the grandson of the chief of the Maini tribe, which is the biggest tribe in this. And he became our driver, fixer, interpreter, guy that we go to and we're like, what in the world happens now? What do we do? And of course he was like, we must go see this person, and we must sit with the chief, and
they can all speak English?
No.
Okay.
Mkolisi can. He went to an English school. He was our interpreter. Many of the people don't speak English. The king actually for a while was funding first grade teaching, and then it became first and second grade. And then after, I think 2010 or 11, went back to first grade only. So, he was paying teachers from South Africa to come into the country and teach these kids. I could talk about this for 5 hours, but there aren't a lot of school houses there. I mean, this is a very, very rural place. I don't have pictures, but I can describe out in the bush, like we call them homesteads, and a lot of these buildings are where people live are sticks. They cut down trees, sticks, make a circle, put a thatched roof on it, dirt floor. They might have a mat to roll out in there. People that have managed to have a little resource might, and this is more unusual, you might see a cinder block, one room house, I mean, when I say house, I mean from this table to Ken, that would be the size square of a house or a thatched homestead. So it's very rural, outside of Manzini and Babon, which are the two towns there. And in these towns, there are paved roads, and there's a casino. I found out in Manzini. First trip we go, and we're like, we're trying to get some structure for our little farm thing, and we get directed to this guy Peter, who's a Canadian guy and we don't know how things work here, so we're like, we need a building, and this is the guy in Khaleesi. Hey, this is the guy. Did you hear about the Russian ship that got all the food stolen off of it, in the port over here, in Durban, Africa? And he's like, that's Peter. Peter did that. He stole all that food. And he's like, he's the guy you need to see, And we're like, what? Is he like a criminal or what? It's like, no, that's how things work here, So anyway, I'm kind of getting off track, but our first trip over there, we're trying to get some stuff done on the farm. We're meeting Jumbo, but we also get sort of partnered up with AIM, which is it's a group out of Georgia. AIM, it stands for Adventures and Missions. And I don't know what their theology is really. I still don't know, but Khaleesi, our fixer, was working for them. They had a whole infrastructure about here's where you can stay, here's who you can get to be your driver, here's who can interpret for you and everything. So we were going to use those. That's who Jumbo recommended, And so we meet up with AIM, we meet up with Khaleesi, and we drive from Johannesburg into in country, and here we are. Well, what are we going to do? Of course, we're going to look around the farm and try and figure that out. But Khaleesi is saying, we are, I think, from the very beginning, we wanted to make an impact, and Khaleesi, of course, says what, here's how do you impact. You like throw a rock and you can make an impact right there, because there is so much need, in this place. He's like, I know so many people. And we're just like, well, in the beginning it was like, should we pray about that? And, of course it's like, well, don't waste my time with your prayers. Let's go. We got to get some food. We got to get some, we're going to go visit these people. This woman is dying over here in this homestead and her kids are starving. And, we're like, okay. So this became a thing. Like, we go to figure out what's going on the farm, and Khaleesi is setting us up with visits, right, and projects, and the communities and the tribes have taken places, these homesteads where people have died, which is very unusual, and they're just empty. And some of them they've set up as what they call care points. Usually it's an older woman, a grandmother, because there's a generation of older women, and they kind of miss the AIDS virus for whatever reason, maybe they weren't engaging in sexual promiscuity that is rampant there. And just those two words don't do it justice, because there's a cultural thing underneath what you can see, and it has to do with a lot of practices, ancient practices. It has to do with the way people get married and the dowry, and so it's all kind of very hidden, you know. But you know, when things are hidden, they spread, you know. So, but somehow there's this. It seems to be that there's this older generation of women that have kind of missed a lot of that, and they're the ones that are really caring for a lot of these orphans. Everywhere you go, you know, there's younger kids who have been orphaned from the disease, either single or double orphans. You know, one or both of their parents have died. It's very, very common. And so these care points are places where these kids will come, sometimes 3 times a week, say, and then usually an older woman will be there and cooking food. The World Food Program, the UN's arm of their food assistance division or whatever. In the beginning, we found that we'd go there and we're like, how did this food get here? You know, it's like a bag of bags of fortified, looks like rice mixed with, you know, spices and stuff, and it's vitamins, and the World Food Program drops this here. You know. Kids come, they eat, they play, they run around, they bite each other, they probably give each other AIDS, you know. But they get to eat, you know. So Khaleesi said, we're going to go do some of these visits, you know. Let's go. Let's meet the community. Let's meet the tribal people. Because we wanted to hire them. We were told we'll be doing 6 harvests a year, probably 5 or 6. It depends on the rainy season. And these people come, they harvest, they cut we didn't have any machinery, so eventually we got a tractor, but they cut this stuff by hand, and then they put it in. It's kind of like the way tobacco is cured, amongst layers of cloth, you know, and the cloth is, every once in a while it's turned, right? So, and it's put in a kind of a dark area, so it kind of ferments. And then after a certain time, you put it in a vat and you distill the oil out of it, and that's the oil that the guy that we leased the land from, he said, I've got a 10-year contract for all the oil I can produce on this land. So whatever you guys have, you've sold it already, you know. So we thought, maybe that'll work. We didn't want to make money, you know. We're just trying to get the community a place where they can exist at a better standard of living, you know. Have a job, maybe get some food, just in this little area. So we're working on this. Khaleesi is kind of working on getting us, like, hey, you guys need to learn about Swaziland. You need to learn about what's going on here, you know. I think it was the first time I was there. He says, I want to go out to this homestead. By the way, and Karen knows Khaleesi well, but people there are very, I say, present. So we were talking about being present this morning. They talk very slowly. I have something to say, you know, and you're an American and you're like, does this person have something to say? You know, this is kind of like that. And also they will not look you in the eye. This is disrespectful when they talk. Most of them, and like, you know, Khaleesi, he'll look away and he'll look down. He's having this, you know, this real conversation with you and he won't look at you, but that's part of their culture. So but anyway, he says, I want to go out to this homestead and, you know, we would always take like a bag of rice, a bag of beans, some frozen chickens. They don't get meat. That's really a delicacy or a special treat. Some oil, some soap, some spices like salt, pepper, whatever. That was kind of what became kind of the package that we would take out there. So one of my first visits with M. Khaleesi, we go out to this homestead, we see it, they're very proud, they very welcome, they bring out a mat, they put it down on the dirt, they want you to sit, they want you to spend time with them, because they don't have jobs, and there's not even a word, I'm gonna probably end up going down rabbit holes and skipping around here, there's not a word for hope in their language. They just live in the present. Is that good? Yes. Is it bad? Yes. Because the reason that they do is bad, right? What else are they going to do? I mean, you may go down and walk to the river and get some water. Maybe someone put down a well down the path or whatever. But really, what do you have to do? So we go out there, we're sitting down on the mats. It's two women. They're probably in their 20s. There's three children. I would say two of them are, maybe 4 and 2, and then there's a baby, probably, under a year old. M. Khaleesi is interpreting for us. They're very, very grateful. When they see the chickens, they weep. They don't eat often. It's what do they call it? They call it food scarcity, right? I mean, I call it starving, but they don't always starve. So they do get food. They get food from people who help the World Food Program, or maybe they get it from somewhere else. But so it's hard for them to eat every day, a lot of these people. And meat they don't. So immediately I'm moved. I'm like, it's a frozen chicken, and these people are weeping, over a chicken. So one of the women is sick. She's obviously sick. I'm not stupid, and we knew kind of what we were getting into as far as this is a country with disease and blah, blah, blah. Oftentimes the AIDS virus, HIV, is, it's an immunocompromised disease, so you can't fight a lot of other diseases. You may not have full-blown AIDS, but you might see a person who has lesions all over their arms and whatever, and it could be tuberculosis, or they could be drinking water out of the drainage ditch, which they do, some do. Always try and be polite. We're cooking there somewhere. We're going to have a party. Let's buy this big pot. We bring in a bunch of rice. Let's have a party. Oh, the kids will go down to the drainage ditch and fill up the wheelbarrow with this water. It looks like chalk, and then like everybody, let's have a party, And I'm always like, yeah, I'll eat a little of that, and then I kind of go around the corner. I'm like, but you see, they have disease everywhere, So this woman is obviously, she has something. It's probably AIDS, because she's not doing so great. So we pray with them. We are asking questions, and I asked M. Khaleesi, like, would she tell me if she knows how she got sick? And so M. Khaleesi's interpreting. She says, and she seems to be very open about it. By the way, this is down in Soko, in the southern part of Swaziland, near this border of South Africa. Right on the other side of this border is a South African army boot camp, we'll call it. Young men in barracks there, and they come across the border a lot for fun, right? For women, to blow off steam, whatever, to have sex, a lot of times I would call it rape, but in their culture, it's very odd. sometimes an older man sees a woman, he says, you know, I want to be with that woman, and the woman will say, you know, okay, and you know, I have to say yes. This young lady said she had heard that the World Food Program had a was having you know, they had a place where they were handing out supplies and stuff down the highway. She walked down the path to the road. She got a ride from a guy in a truck, but there was an exchange there. You know, he would drive her whatever it was, 10 miles down the road, you know, for sex, for the favor, for the trade. That was her story. And, you know, I'm just kind of a little bit shocked by that, right? But without asking, you know, I mean, Khaleesi was like, somehow she said, you know, my son, the baby, is starving, and I have to get food for my child, you know. And I'm like, oh well, yeah. So it's mind blowing what, you know, a mother, not just in Swaziland, probably a mother anywhere, will do for their, out of a devotion to their and protection for their children. Yeah, I was pretty moved by that in the beginning. We left the food, we prayed for their family. The two women were friends. One was sick, one was not. The next time I went back to that place, like a year later, probably, we were in that area, we went back. Well, I told Khaleesi, I want to go back to that homestead, and I want to see if we, you know, if there are any needs that we can help with and meet there. And so we went back, and we found her friend, but the woman that I talked about, she was buried there in the yard. I call it the yard. I mean, you know, it's the brush, the bush, it's not jungly down there, but there's a lot of shrubs and a lot of trees. It's very dry. Yeah, she was buried there, a little cross, rocks. I was very privileged to go to eventually to a memorial service, a funeral for a woman that died while we were there praying for her, and she died. But maybe I'll tell that story. But so I went back. She was gone, you know, she had died, but her friend was there, and we got to meet her. And again, she was very welcoming. She was taking care of her friend's baby. So now she had 3 kids there. No man anywhere, which is not unusual at all. But oftentimes when a parent dies or both parents die, the kids will just take care of each other. You know, maybe there's a teen kid taking care of little kids. Maybe you'll go to a homestead and there's a go-go, a grandmother there, and there's 6 kids in there, and none of those kids are related to her, you know. But some, you know, these people really take care of each other. And I started to learn a little bit about their culture. They have this issue with jealousy, and I still don't quite get this, but they really are very equitable with each other. They share everything, but there's also this underlying jealousy. So if something is not shared, then there's retribution for that. One time we took, you know, some food out to a place and some help to a place, and Khaleesi we were looking for certain people, and Khaleesi said, let's go around. And there was probably 5 or 6 homesteads in this area. And he's like, let's go around and meet everybody we'll just leave the food here on this trail. So we go to the first one, we say hi and whatever, you know. We go to the second one, and they say, oh, you're looking for these people over here. Okay, we go back, everything's gone. The rice is gone, the beans are gone, the chickens are gone, everything. Now the Americans, I think I had like some medical people with me on that one, and then nurse, and we're all like, aha, you know, somebody has stolen our food, you know, whether that the white man has come to bless the. And of course, M. Khaleesi immediately was like, you idiots, just calm down. I'm going to figure this out. And he goes around and asks, he goes, and the thing was, somebody had taken it and they were distributing it already to everyone.
Well, you did leave it on the ground.
Yes, it was my fault. It was my fault. But in a way, I could have just left it there and left it to them.
Right.
I mean, they're doing a whole loaves and fishes thing with it anyway. Why do I need to get involved? I'm stupid. I'm an American, So that's kind of their cultural kind of baseline is we need to take care of each other. And they really do that consistently, which always fascinated me. It still fascinates me. There is, that double-edged sword of shame and honor there. They want to bring honor, they don't want to bring shame. That's great sometimes, but sometimes it causes things to get hidden and tucked away, and if someone has brought shame, then they're kind of ostracized. But the sharing is a beautiful thing, the community spirit, the community, I would call it really love is incredibly inspiring. We ended up kind of growing the farm, but it became not really our focus after a while. I mean, it wasn't, we had a rainy season and we lost money. We had to put more money into it. And then I think finally Jumbo just kind of said, I'm going to run this thing. You guys try and get money for it and just leave me alone, which was fine because we weren't there enough. You can't just live here and go over there once in a while and run a farm, We started a nonprofit organization to try and raise money because that's the thing to do, right? We're here, we're kind of this organization that wants to raise awareness about it, maybe throw a few bucks at it. So we started, and it's ongoing, it's still ongoing. It's called Beyond Survival. You can look it up, beyondsurvival.org. But we sort of started to branch out into other things, and we still do. We ended up building a school there, some playgrounds for kids at these homesteads, a lot of food distribution, wells. One of the first wells we dug, the organization dug, which means we tried to finance it, and obviously African people dug this well. I did not dig a well, right? But we put down this well at this playground, and we were all, excited about it and proud of ourselves around. And then the next thing we know, it's like, the well isn't working. Well, why isn't it working? Because people from around have come and filled it up with little stones. They ruined it. And we're like, why would they do that? I mean, all these kids were drinking clean water. They didn't have to walk however many miles down to the river. The kids came because we had a playground there. We raised money and brought a playground, like a nice playground over, and put it there at this care point where kids came to eat. Now they had a playground. Then they had a well. And so in Khaleesi was like, you guys put a fence up around this area. It made it look like it was only for these people. It didn't look like it was for the community. So we're like, what do we do? He's like, let me talk to the chief, his grandfather. Let me talk to the chief. We have to get the chief's blessing, right? The chief's like, hey, I say you can put down the well. Put down the well, tear down that fence, and I'll let everybody know that they can go and drink out of this well, you know. We're like, oh, okay, we'll just raise another $5,000 or whatever it was, you know. It was things like this that, you know, these were real learning experiences for me. You know, there's a context for our culture. I get it. I'm not going to sit here and bash it all night long. It has some problems, but it doesn't work in Africa. You know, I went there to help and on an adventure, but I mean, I had to be humble. I had to learn things. I had to be, you know, we've taken people there that are not going to learn anything. They don't want to learn. I met some very committed people who love Jesus. They follow Jesus. They want to change their country too. They're very committed to that. I sit and pray with them. They weep with me, and we, you know, we pray over the dying and the suffering. And these people also pray to their ancestors, right? They believe in animism. The Dutch came and colonialized this area, and they brought their form of theology there, and it's gotten integrated. And it's not always a bad thing, but, you know, also as an American Christian, you go there and you're like, no, wait, who are you praying to? You know, Tom and I were hiking today, and he's talking about, you know, an experience in South America where they're like, somebody says they're praying to the demons, or it's witchcraft or whatever, you know. And yeah, I've had people come over from here, and they're like, oh, this is satanic or something. I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure they're praying to the same Jesus you're praying to, but somehow that's satanic because you don't get that this is a different culture, right? The things I would say that caused me to reevaluate some of my thinking and my theology, you know, is that thing where you get shaken a little bit out of your comfort zone. You know, mine was Africa. I went there in Manzini. There's a clinic. It's not really a hospital. You can get some medical attention there, and there is a children's ward there. We would go there and just pray with people, just to kind of be present, you know. Some people were very sick. Some, you know, you might go in there and there was, you know, a young person with a broken arm or something. But there were people there that were really suffering, really suffering. They don't have American medicine. They don't have morphine, you know. There's not a dignity for these people at the end of life. Now, you can have the end of your life in a clinic, in a ward, but most of them have it in a homestead, on a mat, on a dirt floor, or sitting by a tree, by a path. You can walk down a path in Swaziland, especially in the southern part of Swaziland, and see a body leaning against a tree, and not, is that person taking a nap or are they dead? Death is that prevalent there. It's just part of their daily way of doing life and accepting life. They accept life. They celebrate life. They also celebrate death and accept death. And it's not pretty. So we go to this ward, and we're, you know, I'm kind of by myself, just going around. I don't know the language, and Mkolisi is off somewhere, or we had another interpreter there too. I'm on my own. I walk into a room. There's a young boy about 13 on a table, and probably his grandmother with him. He's in a lot of pain, and there's a lot of blood in there. He's moaning. I think she thought I was a doctor. I don't know if they see medical people there that much, but I was in shock. Now, I've been in the hospital, but it's our hospital, right? been in somewhere someone's very sick, but it's our version. It's clean. That person is getting the help they need. But I see it and I kind of turn away from it, and the woman is pulling me in. And I think she thought could help and that I was, and so she's speaking to me in Siswati, and her grandson, maybe, he's bleeding in the end stages of AIDS for sure. He's bleeding out of his eyes, his nose. She turns him over and she spreads his butt, and it's gone. It's just blood and body and mucus just coming out. I left. Um, I left and I went outside of the clinic entrance to this kind of wing, and I'm standing out there and just like, whoa, okay, deep breath, Um, and M. Khaleesi comes out and he says, I want you to go back in that room, and I want us to pray for this young boy. And I'm like, me? But I really respect him and I love him. And this was earlier on in my, my journey there in Africa. So I go back in, and my friend Mark, who I thought was going to be on the Zoom call, he comes in there with me, and and this nurse comes in there with me, and it's immediate weeping. Everyone in the room is weeping. The grandma's weeping. I'm crying. The nurse is crying. Mark Chapano, he's crying. M. Khaleesi is crying. And I'm praying, and I'm crying. I don't know what your theology or what room in your theological house has to do with God's power to heal and what that looks like. But at that point, I didn't have that. And I'm telling M. Khaleesi, don't interpret what I'm about to say. We still talk about this. I'm like, because then from then on out, that was always like part of my prayer, praying, Father, be compassionate on your creation here. But then there's a point where I'm like, don't interpret this. God, please take this young man's life. Please welcome him into your loving arms. That was a rough one in the early on, and it's still hard. I mean, some of the things I've seen there, I think I have a little bit of, leftover PTSD, but I kind of got used to it. They're used to it. That's not the only time I've seen that. I took my dad, it's been like 5 years ago now, and we're going out on some of these things. We go out to a homestead. There's a woman. She's lying on a mat. She's bleeding. Now I immediately, like, I'm not a saint. I'm not a theologian. I just love Jesus. So I get on my knees at the end of her mat, and I put my hands on her, and I'm praying, and I say to M. Khaleesi, don't interpret this part. We go out. My dad looks at me. He's like, what's wrong with her? I'm like, Dad, these people in this country are dying of this disease, and no one is doing a damn thing about it. We have antiretrovirals. They cost pennies a day. The first world doesn't care about this country. The church doesn't really care about this country. I'm not angry. I'm just sad about it. People like this, you go out to 10 homestead visits, you're going to hit one like this, which we did later. We went to a woman's home. Her name was Dudu Zanela, and she was dying on her mat. Her sister was there, and her 2 kids, 11 and 9, were there out playing behind and by the time we got there, this is my last story, by the way, I can't do this. She was dying, but it's the death rattle, so it's her time. And we left, we prayed for her, and within minutes she was gone. And it was sad. We're kind of used to it. My dad isn't used to it, but we wanted to help. We wanted to help the family, and they were very gracious, allowing us to be there. These moments are, I thought I would get into this a little more. They're very holy. Anyway, I don't quite understand, by the way, the depth of sorrow that I felt and the intersection of sorrow and holiness and beauty. I just felt like God was there. God was present. And there was a purpose. So Dudu Zanela was known in her community, and they wanted to have a memorial service for her, and they invited us to be a part of it. And we said, yeah, we'd love to do that. We actually, we rented some tents we brought down from Manzini, and we got a bunch of food and stuff. And they have this big party. Their burial practices and stuff are really unusual. When the sun goes down, they they gather around, they sing and whatever, they watch the sun go down, and the men, they start to drink. They make their own beer. Like, we all know what the world's oldest profession is, but I think alcohol making might be the world's oldest profession.
Yeah.
And so they have some hooch there. They make it out of different things, bananas. They make it out of the amarula plant. Google drunk elephants. The elephants eat this stuff and they wobble, and it's and they drink. So the people there drink it too. And yeah, I drink it, not like they do, but just out of respect, I'll drink it. My dad, he was like, "I'm not drinking that." I was like, "Dad, just roll it around in your mouth and spit it out." It's like, be respectful. Drink the hooch they made for you. And so the sun goes down, the men start drinking and digging the grave. Now Dudu sits, she's out behind the homestead, like the body just lays there. They can't leave it there for very long. This is on a Friday night. And they invited us to come, but we were like, this is a sundown to sun up and beyond party. And we're like, well, first of all, we'll come like 4 a.m. Secondly, we don't want to be the focus of this. So we'll kind of sneak in the back because we got those tents, right? I would say the tent, maybe, I don't know, maybe 100 people could go in that tent. And it was packed. So the men dig the pit, and they get drunk when they're doing it. And they have an axe and they have a shovel. It's very rocky too. Stones are like, a lot of stones like this in the dirt. So we show up at 4, and we were going to go to the back. They have plastic chairs, front row. Plastic chairs are where we're sitting on the front row. Everyone else is standing. We're sitting. So we go up there. The women sing, and they have beautiful voices. They'll sing a song. You guys have been in Africa. You go to a church in Africa, and you're like, these people like can win America's Got Talent. They can, it's beautiful. It's just wonderful. But so they sing, and then somebody will say something about, doo-doo, which we don't understand, but we're there. They're singing. You can hear the pit going into the ground, right? That's how that works. The song, the pick, the song, the shovel, And it was funny because they dance. So we sing, we're there for an hour or whatever. Then it's time to bring Doo-Doo in, right? So they bring her in, her dead body, and we're standing here, right? Here are our chairs. And everybody stand up when the body comes in, and they put the body right there. So we're just here standing over a dead body. And that's when they start to dance, when the body comes in. And the men come in, and the men are drunk, right? So some drunk guy grabs my dad, and he's pulling my dad, and they're stepping over the body, and my dad's looking at me like, what do I do, And I, as usual, I'm like, go for it. This is Africa. This is, just play along, have fun. I mean, it's different. It's unusual. It's mind-boggling in a way. But the thing that got me the most was the sun comes up, and the body goes out. The men carry the body out to the pit, to the grave, which is shallow. And now we sing. There's more songs. The women go out and pick rocks just around in the bush and everything, and they bring them back and they pile them up, like big pile. This takes a while. All this is going on. The 11 and the 9-year-old are sitting or kneeling next to the grave and next to their mother. And when there are enough rocks, they put Doo-Doo in the hole, and everybody takes a rock and throws it on top. The little kids, the 9-year-old didn't break. The 11-year-old was crying. The 9-year-old, I don't know, he just sat there. I was crying. The 11-year-old was crying. Anyway, we got to experience that, and that was a holy moment. We decided to put these two kids through high school, so all their school fees, and they went to a private school. The 11-year-old I think he's in high school now. I don't think the 9-year-old, I'm not sure what grade he's in. I'll have to ask Rick. We actually have a board meeting on the 27th. I forgot to tell you about that. It's all almost 7 o'clock. So I could talk for hours and hours about Africa, but this is the way forward. The way forward isn't about my experience in Africa. It's about coming to a place where you have to rethink some things, right? How do we process that? Hopefully we do it together, maybe in a place like this where it's safe, where we can. You haven't asked me one question, Ken. Where we can. I'm going to start picking on you. My journey started before Africa, but Africa I think had a lot to do with it. But it could be something else for sure. It could be. Karen was just this week. Within a week, she was on the border of Poland and Ukraine with war refugees pouring across the border, and the very next day, on a tour of Auschwitz. Some people that might cause them to rethink some things, And I'll just throw this out. The problem of evil in the world, Auschwitz. How in the world did a Christian nation of Germany, 92% Christian, Catholic and Protestant, I believe, allow the Holocaust to happen? How does evil at that scale exist in a world where God is in control? I just threw that question. I'm not saying answer that question, but I think maybe the why in your road is Auschwitz. Mine was Africa. But Ken thought that the earth was 6,000 years old. Jesus rode dinosaurs. Then he read a book on anthropology and he had to rethink some things. Am I right, Ken?
There, you got it.
Or, you know what I mean. You're reading the New Testament and you're a woman and you come across the thing that says women should be silent in the church. And you're like, well, I'm not sure I agree with that, Maybe I need to dig into this and think about some of the way I think about my theology, So I'll try and wrap this up, and keep this last part shorter. Africa helped me begin to remodel my theological house. I would not suggest tearing your theological house down. There's probably some things in there that are worth keeping. Jesus, for sure, is worth keeping. But maybe your eschatology. Maybe you think, the end times and the prophetic sort of culture that grew up around this somewhat recent movement might be worth, remodeling. I'm not telling you what to do. This is my story. It may not be yours. But I noticed that while I was remodeling my house in Africa, and not in Africa, I came back like 2 years after I'd been going to Africa, and I'm like, why are we flying 8,000 miles? Why are we investing $8,000? I'm making up numbers. And I went on the internet, I went online, and I was like, I've got to find a homeless outreach in my town. And I got connected with this guy, Robert, who was a flaming, I don't even know what to call this guy, so far off the right-wing deep end, but feeding homeless people. I just was searching, like, I got to find a way to be worthy of a Christianity that I think Jesus is worthy of. I'm exploring, I'm rethinking, I'm moving forward. This is the way forward. I'm on a journey. As I know all of you are too. But while I'm on this journey, while I'm remodeling my house, there are people that want to offer their opinions, right? You know how hard it is to remodel your house while you're living in your house, right? And people are staring at you remodeling your house. That could be hard, maybe it's your friends, your church, your spouse, I don't know. Not always the easiest thing to do, but I would offer you maybe some tips, I don't know. I was more curious, I think, about this process for myself. I've seen people in Africa, I've met people here that they approach this deconstruction, which is kind of the popular, catch-all term now these days, with some cynicism, maybe some anger, maybe some judgment. But for me, it was just like curiosity, I was really more curious about Jesus. I just felt like I was keeping that foundational part close, while I was going through this. And I would recommend that for people. In fact, I wrote down a prayer. It's a prayer I prayed, something like this, through this process. Jesus, I believe in you, even though I don't know exactly what that means or what all this is about or what it's going to look like when I get through this process. And that's okay. That's okay. It's okay. It's a good prayer. God, Lord, have mercy. Just, I'm clinging to you. Stick with me, you know. My journey was more out of curiosity, and my remodeling of my house it's in a process. It takes time. If you're going to do this, if you're going to, I mean, mine wasn't a conscious decision. I mean, Africa, I could go on and on about many, many, many things in Africa where I was like, is this true? Is this value? Does this fit into my value system? Does this fit into my theological construct? Does this fit into the Jesus, the continuum of his life, his teachings, his what he said about the kingdom, you know? So I'm going through all of this. A lot of it had to do with Africa, and it's a long process. 2 weeks is not long enough to remodel your theological house. And by the way, I say for you to remodel your house, I suggest getting a contractor. Because left to your own devices, you might screw some things up. You know, maybe you're not a plumber. I've gotten Ken to help me with some plumbing. You know, I mean, this sounds trite, but I really felt led to certain things. And you can call it what you want, the Holy Spirit. You can call it already kind of taking these baby steps down this path. So now I'm more curious and willing to read maybe a book like we talked about this morning, you know? And that maybe opens up an idea about how I'm going to go on this journey of faith. Be open. Be open to all of that I think that God has to offer you in this journey. Our new friends are Catholics, and I was just mentioning to them, I love the Catholic tradition of service. There are a lot of people that were like, Catholicism, let's not even talk about that, you know? The Anglican tradition of liturgy is beautiful. There were times in my journey where I felt like I couldn't pray. I was praying this Jesus prayer. Jesus, I don't understand this, but I want you to stick with me, you know? But when I couldn't pray, I was introduced to the prayers, right? And a lot of those are Anglican, and they're beautiful. Brian Zahn says, when you can't pray, say your prayers. I did some of that. And I think, you know, it felt comforting to me. And it felt like there was a guide of some kind in my life, you know? Because, hey, I just showed up here. I'm 57 years old. I think that Christianity and its tradition has been fleshed out through sacred practices, traditions, prayers. The early church, you know, I've read a lot about the early church and how they were processing a lot of that. I feel like it's okay for me to hang on to some of that stuff, you know? There's a good foundation there. Be open to that stuff. You don't have to make it up. You're like, I'm trying to rethink some of this stuff, so I'm just going to make something up. No, the church there's a lot available for you. And there are people that have gone through this too. We're among friends here. Everybody here is probably way down the road beyond where I'm at on this. Otherwise, and that's why you started this thing here, the way forward. Get a contractor. Get a contractor. How much time do we have, Tom? Just give me a number.
Wrap it up and do some questions.
Wrap it up. Okay, I'm wrapping it up. So I'll go through this real quick. 4 bits of advice. Number 1, don't be afraid of this process. And don't be ashamed of this process. Reacting to the fork in the road and the sort of shaking off of like, I really have been told that I have to hold fast to these ideas and, you know, I have to plant my flag right here and not move off of it, that, reacting to finding yourself moving away from that out of like fear. I'm not going to be part of this group, or people won't understand me, or, reacting out of fear by your rising doubts, let's call them doubts, that doesn't lead to deeper faith. It's the exact opposite of faith. Certainty is not faith. Certainty is a cheap substitute for faith. Just let the mystery and the doubt just wash over you, and don't be afraid of it. You can give yourself time to work through this, through your doubt, through your questions, through your experience, and you can, believe me, you can find yourself in a much deeper, richer form of faith than where you were at before. Often the case. Number 2, your theological house, what I mentioned, talked about a lot. Your construct in your mind of what you think about theology, what you think about. That's not Jesus. That's culture. That's upbringing. That's things that were passed down to you. That's some good, some bad, but it's not Jesus. Don't get the two confused. Jesus is the foundation of your journey through all this. Keep Jesus close. I wrote down, don't be so certain about your theology. Be humble with it. Number 3, beware of the pendulum, the wild swings. I felt some of this, like I'm going to do this now, I was over here and now I'm way over here, right? There's more of a sweet spot for it, I think. It takes time. You don't need to tear down your whole house. You don't need to tear down your mansion of theology. You don't need to throw it all out. I like, one of my favorite quotes is from Jim Wallace, who said, the answer to bad faith is not no faith. It's just working through it to a better form of faith. Don't tear down your theological house. Give yourself some mercy, even in your theology. And I was talking with my wife about this. The people who passed along some of this to you, give them some mercy too, because we were talking about Karen's parents. I'm not going to tell a whole story, but they're older school, whatever. And we don't agree with everything, and that's fine. But these are the people that taught my wife that Jesus forgives sinners and Jesus loves everybody, and they still live that way, right? So give yourself and some other people some mercy. And number 4, be patient. And I mentioned that already. Remodeling your house takes longer than 2 weeks. It's not supposed to take 2 weeks. It's supposed to take a journey. It's supposed to take a lifetime. A lifetime. I have some other things to say, but it's already 7:15. Do you mind if I close with a couple of prayers? All right. I'm going to read 2 prayers. And you've heard them both, or you may have heard them both. One I like. One I pray more often. One I taught my kids, and it's the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. And where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is giving that we receive. It is a pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born again to life. Amen. You know what? I'll just close with that. That's a beautiful prayer.